Hi, I'm Ilara, and all it took was a warm plate of pancakes served quietly to a hungry boy who never asked for anything for my family to call me an embarrassment, kick me out of the house I helped pay for, and say I was feeding strays to feel special. Their cruel words ignited a fury that burned deeper than any wound. But one evening, 4 black SUVs pulled up to our quiet street, and the woman they shamed was the name the military saluted. Before we dive in, what time are you listening to this, and where from? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your story too. The mornings at Sunny's Diner always started the same. I'd push open the side door with my elbow, let the warm kitchen light hit my face, and inhale that familiar blend of burnt coffee, floor cleaner, and bacon grease. It was 4:45 IEM when I clocked in, same as every Wednesday. The world was still groggy, but in here the coffee was already sputtering, and the fluorescent lights buzzed like they had something to say. I wrapped my apron around my waist, blue and faded like everything else in Portland, and began my routine. Brew the pots, wipe the counters, fold the napkins just right, not too tight or customers would fight to open them, and not too loose or they'd look lazy. Around 5:30 the regulars would start drifting in. Mr. Harris, the ex-truck driver who smelled like motor oil and menthols. Lila, who ordered scrambled eggs and cried every time she read the obituary page. And me, the quiet barista no one ever really asked about. By 6 o'clock, I glanced toward the back booth, and there he was again. Same boy, maybe 8 or 9, small frame, brown windbreaker zipped all the way to his chin even though we had the heat on, a book always open in front of him. This time it looked like a library copy of The Lightning Thief, pages held flat by his water glass. He didn't speak, didn't move much either, just read slowly and sipped water like it was a luxury. He reminded me of myself at that age, small, forgettable, watching the world from the edges. Except back then, I didn't have a booth or a book, just a worn coat and the sound of my stomach keeping me company. On the 4th day, I saw him. I did something I didn't plan. I brought him pancakes. I think the kitchen messed up, I said, setting the plate down like it was no big deal. You don't have to eat it, but I'd hate to waste it. He looked at the plate, then at me. His eyes didn't narrow like he was suspicious. They just froze, like no one had done something kind without strings in a while. He didn't say thank you, just stared for a second, then picked up the fork. That became our thing. Every morning, I'd bring him something. Pancakes, oatmeal, sometimes eggs and toast, always with a casual shrug like, oops, the kitchen overdid it again. He never asked. I never explained. I just rang it up and covered it with my tips. Most days, I barely made enough for gas and groceries, but somehow feeding him felt non-negotiable, like a quiet promise I'd made without words. Sometimes I'd sneak glances as I wiped the counter. He never ate too fast, but there was an urgency in the way he held his fork, like hunger was something he didn't want anyone to notice. I never asked for his name. I figured if he wanted to tell me, he would. Their scorn for my kindness was a constant shadow, whispered behind my back at every family gathering. That afternoon, I went to dinner at my mom's house. I didn't want to, but skipping family dinners only fed the narrative that I thought I was better than them, that I forgot where I came from. As Gloria liked to say, the roast was dry, the conversation drier. It was Tessa, my older sister, who brought it up. She always did. So, she said between bites, you still feeding that little vagrant behind the diner? Everyone chuckled. Except me. I'm not sure he's a vagrant, I said quietly. He's just a kid. My mom set her fork down with a clink, looked at me the way she used to when I brought home anything less than a B. Feeding strays doesn't make you a saint, Ilara, she said coolly. Tessa cackled. It's just another one of your little charity projects, makes the rest of us look bad. Her mockery was a public execution of my compassion. My brother-in-law muttered something like, that diner attracts all kinds, and even my uncle chuckled into his whiskey glass. I stared at my plate. The mashed potatoes blurred as heat rose behind my eyes. I didn't speak, didn't flinch, just folded my napkin, smoothed it flat, and pressed the creases with my thumbs. No one defended me, not even Dad. He just cleared his throat and changed the subject to gas prices. Their silence was a betrayal that cut deeper than words. But it didn't matter. I wasn't there anymore. I disappeared from that table, not physically, emotionally. They weren't mocking what I did. They were mocking who I was. After dinner, I helped clear the plates. Quiet, efficient, like always. As I stood at the sink, scrubbing dried gravy from Gloria's antique dishware, I heard her voice behind me, low and casual, as if she were talking about the weather. She always thinks feeding people makes her matter. Her words were a knife twisted in my heart. The sponge stopped in my hand. I didn't say anything, didn't turn around, didn't cry. I just wiped the plate a little harder than I needed to. I didn't say a word that evening, but something inside me cracked clean in half, and by the next day, it hadn't healed. It had hardened. The diner was already half full when I slipped behind the counter at 5:15. Lila waved her usual paper with that tired smile. I waved back. The coffee machine sputtered, the griddle hissed, and outside a thin mist clung to the windows like breath held too long. Then he walked in. Caleb. Same oversized backpack, same cautious step, same seat. The corner booth beneath the flickering light no one ever fixed. He didn't make eye contact, just slid in, opened his book, and folded his hands in his lap like he was praying silently before reading. I poured his water, brought him the usual, pancakes with a pat of butter, warm syrup on the side. He looked at it, then at me. I didn't smile this time. Not out of coldness, just, I didn't have it in me. "Thanks," he whispered. But before I could walk away, I caught movement from the counter. One of Tessa's friends, Kelly, the one who always wore rhinestone sunglasses inside, was there, sipping a diet soda and holding her phone low, tilted slightly, toward Kellith's booth. I paused. She looked up, met my gaze, then immediately looked away. Her mouth twitched into a smirk. My gut tightened. I told myself I was being paranoid. People took photos of their food all the time. But Caleb wasn't a stack of pancakes. He was a child, a hungry, quiet one, not a damn trend. Her sneaky filming was a violation of his innocence. Still, I kept moving. Tables to bus, orders to call. I didn't have time for my sister's high school leftovers playing journalist, but I felt it, eyes on my back all morning. By evening, I was too tired to cook. I reheated some soup from a can and was halfway through folding laundry when my niece, "Auntie, have you seen Instagram tonight? You're trending." I paused, thumb hovering, then clicked the link. It was me. A shaky video about 30 seconds long. I was walking toward Caleb's booth with a plate of pancakes. I sat it down gently. He nodded. I smiled, soft, quiet, the way I always did with him. But the music playing underneath was sarcastic, some remix that mocked sentimentality. And the caption, "Local barista plays charity angel for clout." Who's filming the kid? Their public shaming was a deliberate attack on my character. My breath caught. I scrolled through the comments. She's probably tagging military hashtags to get sympathy clicks. That's not kindness. That's content. Bet the kid's being exploited. Who lets this stuff happen? I sank into the couch. I hadn't even known I was being filmed. The following evening at the family dinner table, it wasn't silence that greeted me. It was celebration. Tessa was already seated, wine glass in hand, like it was a damn gala. Mom wore her usual cardigan, pearls on, despite it being a Monday. "Well," Mom began with a chuckle, "looks like your little side project finally got you some attention." I didn't answer, just sliced my roast chicken. Tessa leaned in, eyes gleaming. "You always said you weren't doing it for credit, but now look at you, all over the internet." Her gloating was a twisted triumph. Dad chewed slowly. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. "You embarrassed yourself," Mom continued, reaching for more potatoes. "And us. Honestly, I warned you. These things don't end well. People don't like show-offs." My hands clenched under the table. Feeding strays doesn't make you a saint, she added with mock tenderness, repeating the comment word for word. Gloria's voice was a venomous echo of the online hate. Tessa laughed. So did my uncle, my cousin, even Ava, who'd texted me the link in the first place, looked away with a tight-lipped smile. I felt heat crawl up my neck. But it wasn't shame. It was something else. Something deeper. Something older. That video wasn't mine. I didn't post it. I didn't invite that camera. I didn't put Caleb's face on the internet. But there it was out there, labeled, mocked, twisted. Their glee at my humiliation was infuriating. After dinner, I washed my hands and checked my phone again. A message request had come in. You should be ashamed. That child isn't yours to use. No profile picture, no real name, just digital venom from someone who didn't know a thing about me. The anonymous hate was a pile-on orchestrated by their cruelty. I stared at the message. My fingers hovered. Then I closed the app. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor. They didn't just want to humiliate me. They wanted to erase the only part of me that still felt real. That act of quiet, of feeding a hungry child with no expectation, was mine. It wasn't for them. It wasn't for likes. It wasn't for my mother to weaponize or my sister to broadcast. This wasn't just about Caleb. This was about all the ways they tried to snuff out the one part of me they couldn't control. The next morning, I packed Clave's plate, just like always. But this time, something in me was watching back. I didn't smile when I set the pancakes down. He didn't ask why. Maybe he could feel it too. How quiet no longer felt like peace, but pressure. Their judgment loomed like a storm cloud. After my shift, I walked home slower than usual. My coat zipped tight, even though the wind had softened. There was a strange stillness in the neighborhood that evening. Porch lights glowed, but curtains were drawn, and when I reached the front steps of the house I grew up in, I noticed the porch light hadn't been turned on. Inside, they were already eating. No one looked up as I entered. The roast smelled overcooked, and someone had opened a cheap bottle of wine. Tessa sat where I always used to sit, my spot, wearing a silk robe like she lived in a magazine spread. My mother, Gloria, didn't even raise her eyebrows. My father, usual at the head of the table, stayed quiet as he carved his meat methodically. I hung my coat, pulled out the last empty chair, and sat. No one offered a plate. Gloria set her wine down with precision. "We've been talking," she said evenly, "and we think it's time you spend a little while elsewhere." Her words were a calculated eviction. My eyes met hers, but her gaze didn't hold. "Elsewhere? You've brought a lot of attention to this house, Elara," she continued, "and not the right kind. We just think it's better for everyone's sake that you take a little time away." I glanced at my father, hoping maybe he'd say something, but he kept cutting his steak like he hadn't heard a word. No eye contact, no hesitation, just quiet compliance. His silence was a final betrayal. "So, you want me to leave?" I said, not as a question, but a confirmation. Tessa lifted her glass. "It's not permanent. Think of it like a PR cleanse." The internet moves fast. People forget, right? Her smirk was a taunt I coldly re-whispered. People forget. I didn't finish my sentence, but in my head it went like this. People forget who raised them, who kept this house clean, who worked double shifts when Dad had back surgery and Tessa was busy chasing auditions in Seattle. People forget me. I stood, left my coat on the hook, and walked upstairs. At 8:30 p.m., I heard the front door open. When I came back down, there it was, a black trash bag. It sat right at the threshold, like a warning. My belongings, some clothes, old shoes, a few books I kept in a drawer, shoved in like leftovers no one wanted to refrigerate. Tessa leaned against the doorframe, sipping wine. "Don't say we never gave you anything," she said lightly. Her cruelty was a public display of power. Gloria appeared beside her and reached toward the door. "I hope you'll be mature about this," she said. "No need to make things dramatic." And just like that, she locked the door. I didn't cry. Not then. I picked up the bag and walked down the steps. It was colder than earlier, and I had no place to go. No car, no suitcase, not even a coat because it was still hanging by the door where I left it and now apparently belonged to someone else. So, I walked to the diner. Sonny's was closed, but I had the keys. Leela trusted me. I let myself in, made a cup of coffee, and curled up in the booth where Caleb usually sat. That morning's pancakes were still on my mind. It wasn't about breakfast anymore. They didn't just kick me out of the house. They decided I didn't deserve to belong to them at all. Their rejection was a deliberate erasure of my existence. By sunrise, I needed answers. I showered in the back and changed into my uniform, folding the trash bag into a corner like it might disappear if I didn't look at it. By 9:00 a.m., I walked into the bank, breath steady. "Hi," I told the teller. "I need to access my emergency savings." She typed something, frowned, then typed again. "I'm sorry, there's a note here. You've been removed as an authorized user on the account." Their theft of my security was a devastating blow. "What?" I don't have access to the full details, ma'am, but it looks like the primary owner made some changes yesterday. I didn't say thank you, I just nodded and left. At the pharmacy, I asked to check my insurance. The clerk tapped her screen, paused, then politely said, "You're not listed under this plan anymore." My hands trembled when I dialed the estate lawyer who used to handle my father's affairs. "Elara?" he said, surprised. You're not listed on anything anymore." "Not since last month. I assumed you knew." I stared at the cracked sidewalk beneath my shoes. They hadn't just kicked me out. They'd erased me, removed my name from accounts, insurance, even the family trust. Quietly, deliberately, like scraping old paint from a wall. I didn't get angry, not right away. I got cold. Their systematic dismantling of my life was a calculated act of war. That evening, I went back to Sonny's. I didn't bother turning on the front lights, just went straight to the back room and sat on the cot near the storage shelf. There in my purse were the documents I requested last summer. Copies of the trust, the accounts, the original insurance policies. I laid them out and compared them. My name had been there. Now it was gone. I folded them slowly and tucked them into an envelope. Across the front, I wrote one word in black ink. Proof. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but one thing was clear. If I didn't exist to them, maybe it was time I show them what that really meant. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just started documenting everything. I'd borrowed a small second-hand scanner from Sonny's nephew and began quietly digitizing what I had. Copies of old family accounts, my own employment history, receipts I'd saved, even insurance mailers with my name on them before I disappeared from the paperwork. Their attempt to obliterate my identity would not go unnoticed. Then came the message from Tessa. "Let's meet. Just us. I think we all want to move past this." That should have been my warning, but I went anyway. She said it would be neutral, that the lawyer's office downtown could be a safe space, her words, not mine. I walked in around 9:00, eyeing, clutching a notebook tight against my ribs. I wasn't sure why I brought it. Maybe to look more official, more guarded, or maybe to remind myself I wasn't just a barista they could brush aside. The waiting room was too cold, too quiet. When the receptionist called my name, I followed her down the hallway, and there they were. Gloria, already seated in her usual posture, back straight, legs crossed, like she was there to sign a building contract, not settle family tension. Tessa wore navy slacks and a cardigan I recognized from last winter. "Glad you came," she said, as if we were catching up for coffee. I sat. The lawyer, a man named Winston, I vaguely recalled from Dad's old will discussions, slid a folder toward me, neat, crisp, centered. "Ms. Carter, we were hoping you could review and acknowledge this document," he said. Neutral like trained legalese always is. I opened it. The title struck me like a slap. Voluntary Release of Family Claims and Narrative Rights. I blinked. Tessa leaned in. It's really just a formality, something to keep things quiet, for the family's reputation after everything online. Her false sympathy was a trap. Gloria didn't smile. She didn't blink either. We're not asking for much, Ilara. We just want peace, and this ensures it. Their demand was a legal gag order to silence my truth. I flipped through the pages. Beneath the legal phrases, waiver of all future contest, non-disparagement clause, forfeit of media claims, I saw what they were really saying. We want you gagged. We want you legally buried. And while we're at it, we'll make sure you can never claw your way back into what we built, even if what we built was partially yours. I closed the folder gently. I'll have someone look at it, I said. Tessa shifted. There's no need for lawyering up. Oh, it's straightforward. I stood. So is theft. Doesn't make it right. Gloria's voice followed me as I left. You've caused enough noise. Let's keep this clean. I paused at the door. You want clean? Then maybe stop sweeping me under your rug. I would not be silenced by their manipulation. And then I left. Afternoon, I was back at the diner. I hadn't eaten, hadn't changed out of the slacks I wore to the lawyer's office. The air smelled like bacon grease and burnt toast. I poured myself a coffee, let the mug warm both hands, and tried to get my pulse back down. That's when she walked in. MS, Every, one of the third-grade teachers from the local elementary school. She smiled shyly. Hi, sorry to drop by like this. I just wanted to say thank you for what you've done for Caleb. We've all noticed. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Then she hesitated. I wasn't sure if you knew Caleb's father was Captain Daniel Morgan, Fort Lewis. That stopped me cold, she continued gently. He went silent last spring, one of those classified deployments. Then last week we heard it was confirmed he's not coming back. I sat down slowly at the counter stool. No next of kin has come forward. There's been no guardian listed. No one's checking on Caleb except you. Her revelation was a heartbreaking call to action. I didn't even know I was holding my breath. I thought of the kid at the corner booth. The way he clutched his book. How he barely said thank you when I placed pancakes in front of him each morning. He was so quiet, so self-contained, like he'd trained himself to never need more than what he was given. I nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me. After she left, I went into the back room. The envelope I'd labeled proof was still where I'd left it, under the register drawer, inside an old recipe book no one ever used. I slid the legal document from Winston inside. Then, beside it, I placed a second envelope. This one I labeled truth. Inside that one, I added the receipts, a few emails from family members, a handwritten card Tessa had once mocked me for keeping, in which Dad had called me the glue when no one else was holding. I held the marker still for a moment. They want to bury me legally, but they forgot something. I buried things too. Receipts, journals, names, and my memory. It didn't forget. They wanted silence. What they didn't count on was my memory. It's strange what stays with you. You forget birthdays where you left your keys, but you never forget a silence that cuts deeper than words. The first Monday of April started like all the others. I got to Sunny's a little before 5:00, brushed the frost off the diner windows, flipped on the sign, and started the coffee. Then I pulled out the chipped plate I always used for Caleb, poured batter, sizzled butter, pancakes just the way he liked them. I placed the plate at the back booth by instinct. He'd always show up by 6:10, sometimes earlier, never later. But that morning, 6:15 came and went. Then 6:30. Maybe he overslept, I told myself. Kids do that. The plate went cold. I wrapped it in foil, tucked it in the warmer, and shook it off. Tuesday, same drill. Plate ready, booth set, nothing. Wednesday, I called the school. Avery was kind, but there was a new caution in her voice. Social services picked him up on Monday, she said quietly. There was a change in custody status. What changed? I asked. She paused. We're not told details, just that a report was made. He's in state care now. I swallowed hard. Was it the videos? Their actions had ripped him from my care. Her silence was louder than any answer. I hung up, sat down at the counter, and stared at the still steaming coffee I hadn't even tasted. By Thursday, my nerves were raw. Every time the door chimed, my body flinched. Every footstep down the sidewalk made me glance toward the glass. I stopped prepping his plate. I couldn't keep doing it just to see it sit there. That afternoon, after the lunch rush thinned and Sonny went to smoke out back, I stepped into the storage room, closed the door. The overhead bulb flickered once, then held steady. I sat on an overturned milk crate, the kind we used to store extra ketchup packets, and unwrapped the foil from the last pancake I'd saved for him. It was rubbery, cold, but I ate it anyway, not because I was hungry, but because it felt wrong to throw it out. He was gone, just like that. No goodbye, no note. I should have done more. Should have asked more questions, filed something, called someone. Instead, I just kept feeding him and telling myself that was enough. I didn't protect him, I whispered, just like no one protected me. Their indifference had stolen his safety. I thought back to being 15, the suitcase at the foot of the stairs, the key left on the kitchen counter, the way my mother called it, teaching me strength. I floated between cousins and couches, sometimes a church friend's basement. I kept thinking, maybe this time someone would ask me to stay. Really stay. No one ever did. And now I'd let it happen to him. That evening, I texted Nora, my cousin in Boise. We used to be close, before Tessa's wedding made lines in the sand. I kept it simple. Just need someone to talk to. Can I call? She didn't reply right away. I closed up the diner, cleaned the coffee machine, wiped the counters 3 times, even though they were already clean. At 8:22 p.m., my phone buzzed. Nora? I don't want to get involved in family things, you understand, right? Her rejection was a final nail in the coffin of family loyalty. I stared at the screen for a full minute. No, I didn't understand, not really. But I'd used the same excuse before. I'd told myself, just stay out of it, don't stir trouble. They all chose survival over truth. I murmured just like I used to. So I didn't text her back. Instead, I made one more pancake, wrapped it tight in foil, then I walked. The April wind was sharper than the forecast claimed. It cut through my coat like truth cuts through comfort, quiet, invisible, but undeniable. The bench was still there, outside Caleb's school, painted green, peeling along the edge. I'd seen him sit there after classes, legs swinging, backpack clenched like he expected someone to try and take it. I sat for a second, let my breath settle. Then I placed the wrapped pancake on the bench. Inside the foil, I tucked a note. I'm still here just in case. And I walked away. I didn't turn around. Some people walk out of your life quietly, but their absence shouts louder than any scream. The letter didn't come from Caleb, but it carried his voice. I found it tucked between the folded edges of yesterday's Portland Tribune, resting atop the register when I opened the diner. No stamp, no return address, just my name in uneven block letters. I held it like it might break. Inside was a sheet of lined notebook paper, the edges torn messy from a spiral spine. The handwriting was shaky, but the message was clear. I didn't know your name until the colonel came, but you looked at me like I mattered. You made me feel full when I was empty. I hope they don't make you stop looking at people like that. You're not like the others. No signature, just the outline of a drawn pancake, lopsided with little steam lines sketched above it. I pressed the paper to my chest. My hands were trembling, but not the way they used to. This time they were holding something steady. After closing that night, I went straight to the back room. I pushed aside the crates of ketchup and napkins, knelt down and slid the little wooden box from beneath the utility shelf. It still had the faded EC my dad carved into the top when I was 14 and declared this diner my real inheritance. Inside were scraps, things most people would call trash. Old receipts, faded thank you cards, the wrapper from a candy a boy once gave me instead of a tip, but I'd kept them. Everyone. I spread them across the table in a neat line, careful not to overlap the corners. A napkin with a scribbled note from one of our regulars long past. You make this place feel like home. A note from a teenage girl who used to sneak in after school. Thanks for always pretending not to see me doing homework here. I felt safe. And then a sticky note I'd nearly forgotten about. Thanks for the pancakes. They make Mondays less scary. Callie. I sat back and whispered to the air. They told me I never mattered, but these say otherwise. The next morning, just after sunrise, I was rolling silverware when there was a knock at the back door. It wasn't the food delivery. It was Aunt Mira, Nora's mother, bundled in her green trench coat, the one she always wore to church. She held out an envelope, yellowed with age and worn at the corners. "Your father gave this to me before he passed," she said softly. "Told me to hold on to it until it looked like the world had turned its back on you." Her support was a beacon in their darkness. I didn't ask why she waited this long. I just nodded and took it with both hands. Inside was his handwriting, slanted, firm, undeniably his. It wasn't long, just one sentence underlined twice. "Don't let them make you believe quiet means weak." At the bottom, in his usual no-nonsense scrawl, he'd added, "Keep the receipts, kid. The world has a short memory." I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just folded the letter carefully and placed it beside Caleb's note. Later that day, I scanned them all. Each napkin, each sticky note, the letter from my father. I created a folder on my old laptop and labeled it "Not for them, for me." Then I slid the physical copies into a new manila folder and tucked it back into the box. I sat there in silence. The kind that doesn't press down but lifts you. The kind that doesn't mean nothing is happening but that something has finally clicked into place. They erased my name, I said out loud to the shelves, the dust, the quiet hum of the cooler. But I remember who I am now. I didn't send a warning, but I stopped hiding the truth. The video went live just after sunrise. It wasn't flashy, no background music, no fancy cuts, just me sitting in the back booth of Sunny's wearing my apron and holding a folded piece of paper in my lap. I looked into the camera once and said calmly, "Some people are ashamed of kindness. I'm just here to say I'm not." Then I uploaded it to a local community board, one mostly used for school announcements and lost dogs. 48 hours later, it had over 50,000 shares. Most of them weren't from Portland. They were from people across the country. Mothers of deployed soldiers, retired teachers, military widows, sharing their own experiences with cold leadership and buried truths. Then came the stories, anonymous comments, then verified ones. One woman wrote, "I remember Gloria Carter shutting down a coat drive at our school. Said it looked too desperate for the PTA image." Another added, "Tessa pulled funding from a children's shelter and redirected it to her marketing campaign, claimed it was better optics." Their hypocrisy was exposed for all to see. I didn't respond to any of them. I just watched. I didn't even have to say their names. The truth had started walking in on its own. By the following Wednesday, I showed up at the monthly HOA meeting. It was held in the community center that still had Gloria's photo from a fundraiser posted on the bulletin board near the door. I came in quietly, took the last chair in the back, and kept my coat on. Gloria was seated at the long table up front. Tessa was beside her, wearing one of those too perfect cardigans and smiling at no one in particular. They didn't notice me at first, but someone else did. A woman stood up, early 60s, gray streak in her braid, wearing a folded army scarf. "My son," she said, "ate free at Sunny's every Friday because someone there didn't ask for anything, just handed him a warm plate and told him to be safe." She turned slightly. I found out who that someone was. Tessa's jaw clenched. Gloria started to rise. "This is off topic," Gloria said tightly. "This meeting is about security lighting and paving." Another woman stood, younger. Her voice shook but held. "I'm CAO's grandmother. I got custody last week. He asked me to thank the lady in the apron. He said she saved his life." Gloria's voice snapped. "This is completely inappropriate." The HOA chair, a man named Jana who once refused to look me in the eye, raised a hand. "Mrs. Carter, you've had your say for 12 years. Tonight, other people get theirs." He turned to me, locking eyes. "You may not have wanted attention, Miss Carter, but you earned respect." Tessa didn't smile anymore. She pulled out her phone and I could see her fingers tremble. Later that week, I heard her campaign lost 3 sponsors. And Gloria, I got wind that she was asked to quietly step down from the charity board she'd chaired for 8 years. Their fall from grace was my vindication. They didn't make it public, but the silence spoke volumes. Then the military outlet picked it up. A journalist from Fort Lewis released part of Captain Daniel Morgan's final message. My name wasn't in it, but the phrase, "the barista who protected my son," was enough. I didn't repost the article. I didn't link to the original Instagram posts. I just brewed coffee at 4:50 a.m. like always, and wiped down the counter twice instead of once. Sometimes silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's power under glass. That Friday night, I checked my voicemail for the first time in 3 days. Among the spam and reminders, there it was, Gloria's voice. Steady at first, but the edge cracked halfway through. "I think we should talk. Just us. No lawyers, no spectators." Her plea was a desperate attempt to regain control. I didn't call her back. Instead, I pulled out the worn receipt I'd used to jot down Caleb's pancake order months ago and flipped it over. With a pen I kept behind the register, I wrote, "You can't erase what never belonged to you." I folded it neatly, slid it into an envelope, sealed it, and wrote across the front in small, deliberate script, "Last act." I placed it under the napkin holder where Caleb used to sit, just for now. I wasn't waiting for their apology. I was preparing the truth to walk in without knocking. That evening, the air in Portland was still and gray, like the sky knew what was coming. I got up before the sun. Didn't need an alarm. Didn't bother with music or my usual cup of cinnamon coffee. I made a fresh batch of pancakes anyway, even if I wouldn't eat them. The smell steadied me. I pulled on my old denim jacket, the one with the sticky note still wedged deep in the inside pocket. I hadn't taken it out. It was Caleb's, written in his uneven block letters. "Thank you for not asking why." By 5:30 I was outside. I walked past the house I'd grown up in, without even glancing at the porch. The window blinds were still drawn, though I knew Gloria had been awake since 4 o'clock like clockwork. I didn't slow down. By 8 o'clock, I was standing across the street near MRS Linden's rose bushes watching. The neighborhood was quiet, save for a few dog walkers and someone jogging with headphones in. No one knew what was about to unfold. Not yet. At exactly 8:22 I am in. They turned the corner. 4 black SUVs, shiny and deliberate, engines barely humming, the kind of cars that make people stop whatever they're doing. License plates, military. Neighbors stepped out of their homes, blinking against the morning sun, phones in hand, some recorded, some just watched. The first to step out was Colonel Michael Vance, straight-backed in full-dress uniform. Behind him, 2 other officers followed. They weren't smiling. They weren't there for a parade. They approached the door of my mother's house like it was a mission briefing. Gloria opened it, expecting something else. Her hair was set, blouse crisp, like she thought maybe this was another HOA event or press opportunity. Her smile evaporated before it reached her eyes. Then Tessa stepped into view, arms crossed in a silk robe that had no business being worn before noon. Colonel Vance nodded respectfully, but didn't wait for an invitation. "We are here to honor a commitment made by Captain Daniel Morgan," he said firmly, to a civilian who showed his son dignity when the world turned away. Neighbors turned toward me, phones angled. I didn't move. The colonel pulled out a folded document from a leather case and began reading from it, An official statement signed by command citing service, integrity, and unrecognized acts of civilian care. Behind him, one officer held a meticulously folded flag. The other stepped forward and presented a polished plaque with brass trim. He held it out to me across the hedge. For Miss Alara Carter, for service to those who serve. Tessa's voice cracked. This can't be real. Gloria didn't speak, but her hand clutched the doorframe so tightly her knuckles turned white. Then a small voice cut through the air. That's her. I turned. Khalib was standing by the sidewalk holding his grandmother's hand. He was dressed in jeans and a navy hoodie, but his eyes were clear, steady. She nodded once. I walked over. I crouched slightly to his level. I kept your table warm, I whispered. He didn't say anything. He just wrapped his arms around me fast and tight, like he'd been holding that hug in for months. When I stood back up, someone began to clap. It wasn't loud, it wasn't orchestrated, it was honest. Then another joined, and another. In a matter of seconds, a quiet wave of applause moved down the block. Not for the cameras, not for show, just for truth. Finally seen, the officers gave me a final nod and returned to their vehicles. The SUVs pulled away slowly, leaving behind a neighborhood no longer pretending not to see. I turned back toward the house. Gloria was still standing there, arms stiff at her sides. Her eyes were glossy, her mouth pressed thin. I stepped forward and handed her a sealed envelope. You wanted silence, I said softly. Here's what it looks like with honor. Their defeat was my victory. She didn't reach for it, so I set it on the porch rail and walked away. Inside was a copy of Khalib's letter, the certification of the military plaque, and a photo I'd taken that morning of the diner booth with a single napkin folded carefully on the table. I didn't go back to that house. I didn't need to anymore. The sun rose, soft and low that May morning, spilling a honeyed light over the sidewalks of Portland. At Sunny's, I turned the key in the front door like I'd done hundreds of mornings before. But something felt different now. Like the air knew what had passed and who I was finally. Booth 7 sat near the window, its vinyl cushions freshly scrubbed. Tucked just beneath the salt shaker was a new addition, a small brass plaque polished to a soft gleam, reserved in honor of quiet kindness. Above it, a cluster of military unit patches had begun to grow, left behind by men and women who'd stopped in after seeing the story in the paper or hearing it passed around base. There was no ceremony, no wall unveiling, just the quiet accumulation of gratitude. I poured coffee for a man in uniform seated at the booth. He nodded once, I nodded back. We didn't speak. We didn't have to. Sometimes Calb's grandmother stopped by, usually late in the afternoon. She'd bring a small tin of oatmeal cookies and leave it on the counter. Once she lingered. He's okay, she said softly. He's got a counselor now. He's learning chess. She smiled. He still folds his napkins like you showed him. That was enough. Later that week, the local paper ran the full story. The barista who fed dignity. They ran my name, my photo in front of Sunny's, and the military plaque beside it. It didn't go national, but it didn't need to. Comments flooded the online version. I read through them in the quiet hours before sunrise. One said, I'm a foster kid too. Someone once bought me lunch and looked me in the eye, and it's the only reason I finished school. Another, you gave more than food. You gave proof we mattered. And one I printed out, folded, and placed inside my father's old field journal, beneath his underlined words, keep the receipts. It read, sometimes family isn't who shares your last name, but who saves your first. I didn't expect her to come. Glory entered just after 1:00 p.m. on a Thursday. The lunch crowd had gone. I was wiping the counter when I saw her reflection in the window, smaller than I remembered, her shoulders rounded, her eyes bare, no makeup, hair twisted into a simple bun. She didn't wear jewelry. She walked up to the counter and didn't sit. She placed an envelope in front of me. "I don't expect forgiveness," she murmured. "I just didn't know you had that much strength in you." A dominion was a crumbling of their facet. I didn't look at the envelope. I didn't touch it. "You always thought silence meant weakness," I said, my voice steady, but I learned it meant clarity. She blinked hard, her lips parted, like she might say something else, but she didn't. Instead, she turned. As she passed booth 7, she paused. Her eyes rested on the plaque. I kept my back to her but spoke calmly, just loud enough. "Feeding strays doesn't make you a saint, but it makes you human." My words were a final rebuke of their cruelty. She didn't reply, just the soft sound of the bell above the door, and she was gone. That night, I closed the diner alone. I switched off lights one by one, the last being the small bulb above booth 7. It glowed for a breath longer than the others, then faded. In my new apartment, small, clean, quiet, I hung the framed photo on the wall across from my writing desk. It showed me standing beside Colonel Vance and Caleb, all three of us in front of the diner. Booth 7 was just visible behind the glass. Underneath the frame, taped carefully, was a note in Caleb's handwriting. "You saved more than my mornings." I ran my fingers across it, not for comfort, but to remind myself of the truth I chose to protect, even when it cost me everything else. Some people leave behind legacies of wealth, some leave empires, some just leave silence. I didn't want any of that. I just wanted to leave a table where no one goes hungry, not even for dignity. Have you ever done something small, something quiet, something no one ever thanked you for, but you knew it mattered, because sometimes that's where the real heroes live, not in applause, but in the empty booths they filled before anyone ever noticed.